First thing is, see, this is a process. It will not happen overnight. First, there should be an awareness, right? Second is you need to develop that, interest. And then once you have that interest, then you have the desire to learn the language, right? And when you have the desire to learn the language, then it goes into action, right? You'll start trying, talking, and start searching, right? So I've tried to follow this pattern and, try to, create that, I would say, the urge and the need to learn the language and the interest, right? By simplifying the whole process. Yeah.
Welcome all. This is DEFDialogue, the dialogue that we do on a regular basis with people who have been influential in one way or the other. In this episode, we are going to talk to Gideon. The reason why we have got Gideon here is because Gideon is from a Lepcha community, but that is also not the reason. The real reason is that Gideon has invented and created a situation of Lepcha language. Lepcha, which is actually an oral language. It doesn't have any of its own script. It is one of the endangered languages. He has very meticulously worked on it and has come up with what you call as a Wangbu framework under which you can learn this language. Not only this language, actually any language one can work. And he claims that it will be really, really great to save many languages and learn many languages. He has also developed a learning management system for learning Lepcha language. I'm very curious and interested to know that what are the issues, and let's approach this entire thing from the perspective that Lepcha, what Lepcha community is, what its language link is, and why we consider that Lepcha language is little known and not known, and why did you think that it was important to work on this language?
Sure. So when you talk about the Lepcha people, right, they are called Rangkups, right? Lepcha people are the people of Maya land, right? The hidden paradise, right? And which is, which is in the part of Sikkim, and they are spread across part of Sikkim, Darjeeling, part of Nepal, and part of Bhutan, right? And just to give you a little background, right? So Lepcha, there's a book written by G.B. Manwari, right, in the 1876. So he has mentioned Lepcha is an ancient language. It's an old language, and it's also older than he claims it's older than Hebrew and Sanskrit, right? And when you go back to the history, right, and during 1300s, right, when the first Tibetan refugee, right, came to Sikkim, right, and what it did was, there was a treaty that was signed between a Lepcha priest, right? In Lepcha priest, is called Bungthing in Lepcha language, right? They are the Lepcha priest, and they are the mediators, who between God and the Lepcha people, right? So they have a very important part in the in the culture, right, and in the religion. So there was a treaty that was signed, and the name of the treaty was the Oath to the Blood Brotherhood Treaty, right? And it was signed somewhere around 1300s, and it was signed in Lepcha language. It was written and signed in Lepcha language and Tibetan language, right? So the language was there beyond 1300s, right? And also later on, when the Tibetan king, right, Chagor Namgyal, came into the power, right? So he helped the language to flourish, right? And now there is a lot of view of linguists saying that it's also a part of it's not an ancient language, but it's a part of Tibeto-Burman language. So this is a very big area of research, I feel, right? And but definitely what I feel is Lepcha is a old language, right? And that's how the whole history comes into play. So then over the time, so what has happened is there's been a lot of migration that has come to this place, right? And especially Sikkim, Kalimpong, Darjeeling, right? And there's been a lot of cultural exchanges that has happened, right? right? And if you see even during the British rule, right, Lepcha was a key language, right, even in terms of writing the reports. And so but later on, there are a lot of migration of other people that has come, and with that migration, the Lepcha people had become slowly a minority, right? And what has happened is also there's a lot of factors, right? Because one is cross marriages that has also played a significant role. And Lepcha is also language has been transmitted orally, right? And what has happened is now there are no lot of, and the assets are very decentralized, right? So you'll not find a lot of assets. And so, and slowly what has happened is as UNESCO states, right, then we have very less, right? And as per UNESCO's data, right, which was given by Dr. Helene Placer, it states that I think there are less than 30,000 speakers, right, of the language, right? And as per there is a body called MLLDB, right, Myalang Lepcha Development Board, right? And according to them, the total population of Lepchas in Sikkim, Kalimpong, which is part of West Bengal, and then Darjeeling, and Nepal and Bhutan is near to around 150,000 people, right, to around less than 2 lakh people, right? So that's the stats we have. And when we start doing our research in terms of understanding why it was an endangered language, right, I would like to bring a slide here. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So because we wanted to understand where is the gap, why is this language dying, right? Why is this race completely endangered, right? So first thing is, what we found was when we wanted to learn the language, right, we could not find much content. It's all decentralized, right? Some people have some manuscripts, some people have other manuscripts. So there was a need to kind of a centralized content, right, that everyone can get access to. Right. Second thing is, oral transmission. So what happens with oral transmission is today, even in, a lot of lectures are in villages, right? And when I started interacting with them, right, most of the lectures, they don't know how to read and write the language, right? It's orally transmitted. And there is a negative side to an oral transmission as well, because, there will be a dilution of the language, right, in terms of phonetics, in terms of technicalities, right, in terms of the technicality of the language, right? So so this is also one way that that language cannot be preserved, right? So oral transmission is another problem. Third is there are very limited assets and accessibility, which I already talked about in my first point, right? So very limited assets and accessibility is another point, right? And third thing is, lack of experts, right? All the language experts are dying, right? So we have very few experts now, right? Who know the language, who know the technicality of the language, right? And also what we also did was we conducted a lot of user interviews, right, within the community, right, and also with Lepcha enthusiasts who wanted to learn the language and try to understand, their point of view. Right. And one word which we found was intimidating. Right. So, they told us that they wanted to learn the language, and, they were able to learn the letters. But after that, framing a word in Lepcha language was impossible. Right. How do I read and write words in Lepcha language? Because Lepcha language is completely different. Right. It's not, it has its own pattern. It has its own way of writing. Right. And that's where they kind of, give up, right? Most of the people, right? And it was very difficult. And one more thing, what we understood was, the environment, right? Because when you learn the language, you also need an environment to speak the language, to communicate, right? To talk about the language, right? And the last thing was, some framework, because the world has transformed, right? We have seen that technology has played a key role in this transformation, right? And we felt that while talking to during our user interviews, there was a need to kind of simplify the language, right, and invent new ways of a framework where people can easily learn the language. language, right? And also leverage technology where, you can reach to anywhere, right? Through the internet or through the technology which we have in today's scenario. And that's where, we found these challenges, and that was where we started our work.
So Gideon, let's come to the innovation that you have done, and you have been working for several years. Last year, I was talking to you, and you showed me the LMS that you have developed to teach Lepcha language, and then now you have released this book of the entire. It's actually a book of learning the entire language, in a manner that is systematic and phonetic and even QR code and everything. So can you please explain that? How did you come to the point where, what is this LMS about and what is this book about?
When we understood this gap, right, and now we wanted to, create a course, right, a very simple course. And it was during the pandemic, right, where everything was standstill, and the internet penetration started to increase. The sale of mobile phones, smartphones started to increase, and that's where we decided, why don't we use a digital medium in order to teach the language, right? And in order to do so, we had to develop a kind of a learning management software, right, or a learning management system. And that time, we find a very matured LMS today, but that time, it was not so matured, right? So what we did was, first of all, we outlined the course, because the main challenges for us was how to make this language simple, logical, and systematic, right? And what we did was, we formed a small team, right? And we and I would like to share a screen with you, right? And this is how we structured the course, and then I'll come to the LMS, right? We started with the base level. If you see here, let's call it base level, right? And the objective, because first the objective should be very clear with us, right? So the objective of the base level was to read and write words in Lepcha language, right? And then we developed level 1, right? The objective was to read and write sentences, and level 2, which was more towards the conversational frameworks and analysis of the lecture content, right? So we started with this base level, and so it had, because we were targeting people, who are already using a technology, right? Using a mobile phone or a laptop, right? And most of them were, either a student or in college, or either a working professional or some kind of a research scholar or a linguist. So what we did was, after understanding their schedule, we try to devise a 2-month course, right? 2-month course, and we categorize that 2 months into 8 weeks, right? So in every week, so weekly, what we did was, we kept a live class for an hour, and that too on a weekend, right? And once the live class was over, then we gave them an assignment and reading materials and some learning videos. And then we also, interacted with them in terms of understanding their submissions. And that's how the whole pattern followed for the whole, 2 months. What do I say? It's a medium, right, to transmit the language, right? Mm-hmm. And what we did was, when we designed this course, we also we also designed and developed a framework, which is there in the book. It's called Wangbu framework, right?
Yes. Can you explain the Wangbu framework? What is it?
Sure. So as I told you, right, you can easily learn the, letters, right? Your vowels, consonants, consang letters. But after you learn those letters, right, the biggest gap we found was, how do you read and write words, right? That's where there were a lot of exit that was happening, right? And what we did was, a Wangbu framework is a set of rules, right, and a set of guidelines. which we have analyzed, some older scripts like Namthar, right, or handwritten scripts. So when we have analyzed those scripts, we found a very distinct pattern, in the language, right? So understanding those patterns, we have tried to decode an approach, right, using set of rules and set of formulas and approach, and this Wombo framework will enable you to read any word and write any word in Lepcha language, both in Lepcha language and in English. So it's a framework, that helps you to kind of read and write words in Lepcha language, and both in Roman English as well.
Yeah. So how much of that indigenous script have you been able to transform or integrate?
So just to let you know, right, the script is the same. I've not done anything with the script.
Okay.
It's as I told you, right, these are older scripts which I've tried to understand, right. Namthar is like a Bible to lectures, right. So
Right.
The scripts are same. I've not done anything with the script. I've not touched also, right, because those are the real scripts, right. And what I've tried to do is, I've tried to give an approach to learn the language.
So you are actually making the language for the digital culture, digital generation, netizens, who live in Instagram era and, of instant gratification. They should be able to learn it very fast. And in a way, you are also trying to say is that the new generation should actually have their own language as well, and they should continue to speak Lepcha, right?
Yes, sir. And I'll also like to share one more point here, sir. It's not only about the digital era, it's also about the, I would say our, older generation, or even, like everyone has smartphones, right? Maybe I'll just give you an example. See, one of the problem in most of the books I would see, is they print the scripts, right? Just to give an example, this is the vowels of the Lepcha language, right? Now, this will be printed on a book. But the first question will come, how do I read this? Because it's a very phonetic driven language, right? So every language will have a phonetic, right? So how do I pronounce these letters, right? So what I've done is I have embedded a QR code. So if you scan this, you will get the sound and the video of this script. Right? So what I've tried to do is, I've tried to simplify, right, using technology. This is a hygiene thing, right? But what I've done is I've tried to simplify the language, so that what happens is when you simplify something, so everyone understands, and when everyone understands, there is an interest for that certain thing, right? Be it a language or be it anything, right? So first thing is, see, this is a process. It will not happen overnight. First, there should be an awareness, right? Second is you need to develop that, interest. And then once you have that interest, then you have the desire to learn the language, right? And when you have the desire to learn the language, then it goes into action, right? You'll start trying, talking, and start searching, right? So I've tried to follow this pattern and, try to, create that, I would say, the urge and the need to learn the language and the interest, right, by simplifying the whole process. Yeah.
So tell me, how many people are learning Lepcha language on your LMS?
So we crossed more than 250 students, and the profile of these students are the profile of the students are from the community, within the community that, from Kalimpong, Sikkim, Darjeeling, right? And apart from that, we were surprised that even the linguist community, right, who have already written books and who provides, a lot of articles and, from different parts of the country. We had from Czech Republic, we had, you won't believe, in our first when we launched a level 1, we had 4 Japanese from Tokyo University, right, and Kyoto University.
Great. So going forward, I would say that thank you very much, first of all, and I wish that Lepcha community to adopt Lepcha language as much as possible, so that from endangered you become 100% linguistically enabled, yourself language enabled.